Welcome to the Women in the Arena podcast, a platform dedicated to honoring America's women veterans who dare greatly in all aspects of life. I'm your host, Sarah Scully. At Women in the Arena, we harness the power of storytelling to illuminate the human experience. Through authentic narratives, we honor the resilience, authenticity, and leadership of women who have served our country. Our name, Women in the Arena, pays homage to Theodore Roosevelt's legendary speech, The Man in the Arena, recognizing the remarkable contributions of women in traditionally male-dominated domains. Welcome to another episode of the Women in the Arena podcast. Today we're thrilled to feature Major Danielle M, a remarkable individual who excels as an Air Force pilot, a dedicated mom, a loving wife, and soon you'll find out a real-life Captain Marvel. In this episode, we're particularly excited because Danielle is joining us as our first remote interview, connecting from hundreds of miles away while preparing for yet another deployment. Her participation underscores the incredible women in the military who balance demanding careers and personal commitments across our nation and abroad. We're so thankful for her time and her contributions to Season 1. Stay tuned to learn more about Danielle. I first want to start and say that this is our first remote interview, which is super exciting. And the reason it was important and exciting for me to do this is because by nature of the work we do as service members, we are often scattered all around the globe. And I wanted to make sure that we were capturing women that are in, locations, wherever it be, whether at home, deployed, working on a special assignment abroad, and make sure that we're able to capture you and everything about you. So thank you so much for making the time. I also want to start with how we got connected. And when we were creating this slate for the Women in the Arena podcast this year, I reached out to a friend of mine named Bryn, who I deeply admire and look up to. She's just a remarkable person. And I said, hey, tell me in your Air Force circle, who's somebody that you respect, that you feel would connect with and be a great example for the mission and vision of this podcast. And you were top of mind for her as a mentor and leader and someone she looked up to. So I always believe if you look up to someone and they connect you to someone else, you know that it's going to be a great connection. And since then, I've just been amazed by your story and your humility and just everything about you. So excited that you're here and ready to kind of dive into your story. So let's start at the beginning. Yeah. Tell us about you. Tell us about where you grew up and how you ended up commissioning into the Air Force. What was that journey like?
Yeah, so I'm from Duluth, Minnesota, and that's where I'm actually at now. So full circle, made it back home. Grew up here. I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth for college, and I commissioned through ROTC. And as a young kid, I always wanted to be an astronaut. And I think that kind of got me into aviation to begin with. I went to an air show when I was around 11 and saw the Blue Angels fly. And I said, that's what I want to do. And I'm not in the Navy, but, flying a more superior aircraft, of course, in the Air Force. But that's kind of the path that led me to where I am today, and kind of attribute a lot of that to, first off, being in Duluth. There's a guard unit here, and that's where I currently work. And I would, hear the F-16s flying over my house all the time. And I have family in the military and the guard unit here. So I had a little bit of a connection with the guard through that. And then my family just kind of had although nobody's a pilot, they all kind of have a little bit of a passion for aviation, I would say, especially my dad. He's definitely the one that kind of got me into space, liking space and aviation.
That's awesome. So yeah, you truly chased your childhood dreams, which few can say. I think I wanted to be a fashion designer when I was a kid, and I don't think that panned out. But I ended up, there's still time. That's awesome. So I know that pilots are proud of their platform they fly. So tell us about the platform that you fly for our folks that are not as connected to the Air Force or aviation community.
Yeah, so I fly the F-16, a single engine, single seat. Some may call it a lawn dart, because if you lose your engine, you're just kind of gliding towards the ground. But joking aside, it's a multi-role fighter, and we pretty much do all the missions, which I really like. And it keeps you busy because we're not sticking to just an air-to-air mission or an air-to-ground mission. We're doing it all. And with the tactics that are constantly evolving, it really keeps you busy in the book studying. And it's a small, lightweight fighter. They keep loading more stuff onto it, though, so it's getting heavier and heavier. It was built to be a true, dogfighting type of fighter platform. That was the original design, but we just keep throwing tanks and bombs and sensors on it. But it's what we need to do, and it's still flying, which is awesome. And it's a great platform. There's multiple different blocks of F-16 too. You'll hear block 25, 30, 32, 40, 42, 50, and 52 that are all mainly flying in the U.S. I'm flying the Block 50, which is arguably the most advanced block in the U.S. Air Force. So it's pretty cool to fly. Big engine and a lot of fun to fly.
Before you went to flight school and got assigned your platform, did you have any pilots that you looked up to that helped you make the decision, or was it just a seamless decision what you wanted to do?
As far as what platform I wanted? Yeah, I kind of always wanted the F-16. I knew that what they were, because they were in Duluth. I knew that they, honestly, to begin with, they look cool. It's a sexy aircraft. Single seat was big for me. I really like the idea of me being, we like to call it mayor of Cockpit City. Like I am the one in charge of my jet, I like that idea. And then while I was going through pilot training, I talked to I had a lot of really great instructors from all different platforms. And the more I heard about the F-16, the more it kind of solidified. I don't have anybody in particular, just pretty much all of them, just hearing about their lives and, the mission itself. Like, yep, that's what I want.
So tell us about your first few assignments as a pilot, from teaching to deploying. Just walk us through a roadmap of your career so far.
Oh boy. Yeah. So, I graduated, went to pilot training in Columbus, Mississippi. I was there. I had to sit for about a year. It was kind of the timeline back then. And I think it's actually still the timeline. Got to Mississippi and I did a kind of a casual lieutenant job helping out around the base for a while. So it was close to a year before I actually started pilot training. Stayed there for pilot training, and then we call it Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals, where if you get tracked to be a fighter pilot, you have to go through this, I can't remember if it was about a 2-month course, where they kind of just one more screening process to make sure that you're ready to go fly, a fighter aircraft. It's going to be a lot more high speed, a lot more things being thrown at you as far as, weapons, tactics, enemy threat type aircraft and ground forces that you have to worry about. So they want to make sure you're really ready to go to that platform. So that was one last screening process. Finished that, and then I went to Kelly Air National Guard Base in San Antonio, Texas, to learn how to fly the F-16. That was about a 9-month course. And then after that, I got to go to Misawa, Japan, which was my first combat Air Force base, which was by far probably the best assignment that I had there. I was there for 3 years, got to live in Japan, integrate with the local community, which was awesome. Kind of a small world. Two of the Japanese pilots that were in my pilot training class actually got stationed to Misawa as well, and the Japanese side. So we were able to link up and they showed me the ropes of Japan. Having a local there definitely helped. I was there for 3 years. In that 3 years, I deployed in 2015 for OIR, Operation Inherent Resolve. And that was probably I would say, one of the pinnacles of my career, getting to actually go and do the job that you trained, your entire career to do. And then after that, I went to Las Vegas, Nevada, and I learned to be an aggressor pilot, which basically is I'm training to be the bad guy. So I'm pretending to be the bad guy. So anybody out there, if you see the camouflage F-16s, that's what I flew. Yeah. So we try to, challenge the good guys, make sure that they're ready to go on their missions. And so I was there for a couple of years. And after that, I went to Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico and became an instructor pilot in the F-16. And that's where kind of one of the schoolhouses to learn how to fly the F-16. So I taught, brand new people coming from pilot training, learning how to fly the F-16. I taught them, became an evaluator while I was out there. So I was evaluating the instructor pilots, if you will. That's one of the jobs of an evaluator. And was there for quite a while, about 5 years. In that 5 years, I left active duty and I went to the reserves, which there's a reserve unit there, and I was full-time for a few years. And then we had a couple kids while we were at that assignment and kind of realized, life is a little tough away from family, and I could do the same job in my hometown. So we call it rushing the unit, if you will. We rushed Duluth to see if they'd hire us, and they took a chance and they hired a married fighter pilot couple, and here we are. So
I love that story, and I love that you came back to where you started, where the dream was born. It's like you boomeranged back to where it all began, which is amazing. I have so many questions. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Tell us about your deployment, whatever you can tell us, just about the types of missions you were doing. And I know any service member can relate to the feeling of, like you said, applying everything you learn in a real-time scenario and how meaningful and important that is. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So if you remember in 2015, that was kind of the peak of when ISIS was taking over Syria and Iraq and doing a lot of terrible things out there. And when I deployed, it was shortly after a couple tragic incidents happened in Jordan. The Jordanian pilot was downed, and if you guys remember, he was burned alive. So we were showing up right around that time, right after that happened, and so tensions were pretty high. We had to stay, higher altitudes when we were flying. The adversary, ISIS, they were learning new ways to avoid us and capture cities, and it was really difficult. I wouldn't say difficult. I guess it was slightly more dynamic of a situation because things were always changing while we were out there. We were still kind of understanding how they operated. We also had a bunch of new weapons that we were employing, and it was kind of cool because my unit and the unit prior to us and our unit were pretty much the first units out there to kind of use those weapons. And it was kind of neat getting to develop those tactics on how to effectively employ them. It was, a lot going on when we were out there. It was, an emotional time too, because I'm up in the air and I'm watching a lot of this stuff happen and doing the best I can to, help the friendly forces on the ground. But from a pilot perspective, it's, we're so far away from like the actual ground that, we try our hardest to help them. But sometimes, you need people on the ground to do that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's a lot, and it's incredible. Yeah. Stress is manifested in different ways, but it's the same emotion wherever we are. And I would imagine you learned a lot about stress management during that period of time in your life, and can maybe take those lessons and apply it today to different situations. What did you learn about yourself during that deployment with managing stress and just managing the pressures of what you were doing day to day, because it was such high stakes?
Yeah, I think that's where I feel like I've always been pretty good at like compartmentalizing stress in certain situations, but I think I learned a lot more there, how to do it effectively and in a more, dangerous / time critical situation. So you can't be worrying about things that happened, 20 minutes ago if there's nothing you can do about it. And I've seen, especially being an instructor pilot, I see that a lot with my students where, something happens in the beginning of the sortie and they just dwell on it and they just, snowball effect. They let it impact the rest of that mission. And I feel like I learned how to avoid that as best I can pretty much on that deployment, because if a situation isn't, a high stakes situation and it isn't going how you would hope it to go, weather rolls in and now you can't see the friendly forces to make sure you're, employing weapons in the right location. Communication may be poor with the people that you're trying to talk to. Things like that. You just kind of have to move on from that, or figure out a solution first, obviously, and then go on from there. And I think that's kind of what I learned in particular, is just how to compartmentalize it in the moment. And then when you get back, that's the whole point of debrief. Is I think fighter pilots are pretty good about when we get on the ground, we don't hold any punches. We tell it how it is. Like, whatever you screwed up, we're going to tell you what you screwed up, and we're going to tell you how to learn from that. So it's not, compartmentalized in the moment, but then when you come back, we do a pretty good job about talking about it and learning from whatever happened on that mission.
Absolutely. So I think we all walk away from our military service with thick skin. The ability to just not take things too personally. Awesome. Tell us about being an instructor, because I would imagine that with all that experience that you had, it must have been so rewarding to go back to where you started and make an impact on students. So tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, it's a very rewarding job. Like you said, it's amazing watching somebody show up and not be able to, start the aircraft. And then at the end of their training, at the end of the, 9 months that it roughly takes, they're, I'm ready to go to war with them. They're combat capable pilots. And so I think having the experience that I had and being able to sit down and talk to them and tell them situations that I encountered and that were maybe similar to that mission, if they dropped a bomb and it wasn't exactly how they wanted to drop it, maybe it wasn't completely valid, and I can go back and give them a situation where like, hey, you know what? Sometimes I suck too, and I did that way back in the day, and this is how you overcome it, and this is how I learned, habit patterns to be an effective fighter pilot. I think that's the most rewarding, when you have a situation in your personal life that you can tell a student and that they kind of hold on to that, and that they remember that situation, and maybe it'll help them in the future. Because I've had a lot of instructor pilots give me certain techniques or, memory joggers for certain things, and those that still stick with me today. And I hope that maybe I imparted some knowledge on some students in that manner.
I know you did, because of our connection and referral through one of your previous students. Highly of you.
Well, Brandon's, well, she's awesome. She's a great woman. So
that's amazing. Did you have an instructor, a pilot that you connected with during your training that made that kind of impact on you?
There was a few instructors in the B course that they just, if I was struggling, they knew exactly. That's the key to a good instructor. Like, not one answer is a correct answer for each student. So my technique might not be their technique. And I had a few instructors that would give me their technique and I would try it and maybe it wouldn't work. But I'd fly with them the next day and they would have a completely different technique. And they knew how to adapt their instruction to me, even if whatever their first technique was didn't work for me. And I think that's important. When I was in Misawa, there was a few other instructors too. One in particular, Siren, female. She is somebody that I really look up to, and I don't know if she knows this about me, but she always kind of stood out to me as a mentor. She was always willing to talk to me about anything in life, flying, marriage, everything. So I kind of looked up to her, and she's somebody that stood out and I think helped me as a student when I was learning, how to be a good combat wingman.
Well, maybe she'll listen to this and find out just that impact.
Yeah, maybe.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about one of my favorite fun facts about you, which is that you helped train Brie Larson for the Captain Marvel movie.
And yeah, but many people did. I was just one aspect of it. So there's a lot of other people that were involved as well. But.
And I think from this point forward, you are my new Captain Marvel. That's what I'm going to associate you as. But tell us about that. I think that's just such a cool fun fact. And I'm also a huge Captain Marvel fan. So I had to fangirl a little bit about it. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it was when I was at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, Las Vegas, and they were making the movie. And of course, Nevada or Nellis Air Force Base used to be kind of known as, I think it still kind of is, it's like fighter country for the Air Force, like the premier fighter pilot base. And I don't really know the path that Hollywood took, but they decided to go to Nellis to try to get a lot of their consultation, I guess, done. And I just so happened to be in the unit, and there were two other female fighter pilots on the base, the wing commander, who was a general, and my group commander, who's a colonel. And somehow they wanted a woman to fly her to kind of excuse me, I touched the mic. They wanted a woman to fly her to kind of get a woman's perspective of being a fighter pilot for the movie. And somehow they picked me to do it, again, one of 3 people, but I got the great opportunity to do that. So I interacted with them a few times for consultation, just, showing them the day in the life of a pilot, the gear that we wore, tried showing them, uniform wear, things like that. Just attitude, mentality. And then we flew her. I flew her in an F-16 and a 2-seater that we had. And so we went out and we flew her and one of the directors, and the other pilot was a Thunderbird. So we went out to the airspace. We flew around. It was a little hectic because it was a little bit different of a block F-16. In the beginning, I kind of described there were multiple different blocks of the F-16. Well, I flew a different block than I had been flying. So very minor avionics were a little bit different. So I was a little rushed, and the whole camera crew, I don't really like being in front of a camera.
I mean, you don't typically have a camera crew following you around at work.
No, thank God. I would be the worst Thunderbird pilot because I hate it. But it was a great experience. We flew, and then after I think she had a great time. Try to show her, some G's and some kind of crazy aerobatic maneuvering,
You
just
did those
to
with
really,
her?
Yeah, we did some, we call it basic fighter maneuvering, BFM. We did some of that, essentially dogfighting with the other aircraft. And I think she liked
That's
it.
awesome.
And then we landed, came back, and we had a good time talking in the Thunderbird Heritage Room. We hung out there for a while. And then I was luckily invited back to the premiere too, which I thought was pretty awesome. So they let us go to the Hollywood premiere, and I brought my little sister, who is also a fangirl for anything
that's
Marvel.
Incredible. I didn't know this piece of information. Tell us about that. What was that like?
Oh yeah, it was cool. We went to Disneyland, and we got to do a bunch of tours and stuff while we were at Disneyland, which was pretty neat. We got I can't remember what studio. We got a Hollywood studio tour, and then got to go to the premiere, walk the red carpet, which was pretty crazy. And then we went to the after party, and shockingly, the Hollywood after party, which I know, there's probably plenty more, but the one that I went to is actually kind of tame. I think it ended at like 9, and then my sister and I went back to our hotel and hung out.
I envisioned for an after party. That's so funny.
Yeah. I'm sure there was a separate one that they didn't want,
outsiders from
the outsiders at.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sure that you didn't picture in the beginning of your aviation career having a Hollywood appearance and getting to walk the red carpet, but what a cool little bonus, especially being that aviation is such a popularized thing in Hollywood, and everybody has their favorite aviation movies, obviously Top Gun. But that's awesome. Wow, so cool. So let's talk about you as a person outside of aviation. I know that you're dual military. You have some kiddos running around. I got to meet one right before we kicked off this recording. Tell us about you outside of work and what makes you happy and how you spend your days.
Yeah, so since I moved here, I transitioned to part-time because I do have 2 little kids. They are a year and a half apart, and they're toddlers, so we are in the trenches right now. So I really wanted to be with them more. I had a little bit of personal guilt my last year at Holloman, where I wanted to spend more time with them and just be a more involved mom. So that's what we're doing now here. And my husband and I, he's also a fighter pilot. We met in Misawa, and he's full-time. So he's doing a lot more of the work. I'm doing a lot more of the, at home, taking care of the kids, but I still go to work 2-3 days a week flying F-16. So it's kind of a interesting dynamic. One day I'm out flying, training to, drop bombs, and the next day I'm at home, wiping poopy butts and stuff.
You're juggling everything all at once. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But it's fun. We're making it work because, being dual military, it's challenging. We have a deployment coming up that I'll be going on here in a few weeks, and my husband will be the stay-at-home dad taking care of the kids while I'm gone. So that'll be a whole new experience for our family. But yeah, my husband and I, we've, as you can imagine, 2 fighter pilots. We have a lot of hobbies and A lot of them are kind of, I wouldn't say crazy, but we're a little bit more adventurous. And so we try to take our kids on as many of them as we can. So sailing is probably the most appropriate one right now. We can't really take them on motorcycles or rock climbing anymore, but we've gotten really into sailing, and I think they really enjoy that. So that's kind of been our big hobby lately.
Amazing. Well, tell us, what advice would you have for dual military couples? Because I know a lot of people that are going to listen to this within our community are dual military or juggling being the only person in the military in their family. And what has worked for you all to balance such demanding careers? I mean, even in your part-time capacity, it's still demanding and you're still deploying, which a lot of people don't realize that in the Guard or reserves, we can still continue to deploy when our nation needs us. So what advice would you give to anybody that's currently navigating, balancing their relationship with the demands of their job?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question, because in the beginning of our marriage, dual military without kids, it was kind of easy. It was fun. We just flew planes and hung out at home and did our adventures. But when you have kids, it's a completely different dynamic. And I think anybody out there that's both parents are working, it's going to be the same. You just kind of got to know your boundaries, and you'll have a come to Jesus moment, or awakening. At least I did, where I wasn't setting those boundaries at work, as far as like, hey, I got to be home at this time. I can't do this thing on the weekend, or there's certain things that I can't do because my family is important. And I think once I figured that out, man, my husband and I both, became a lot easier, with childcare. We got to leave work at, 5:00 because we got to go pick up kids, or somebody has to do that. And learn in the military, obviously, sometimes you can't, set those boundaries, but doing it as much as you can for, personal health and your family health is important, because otherwise, you just let the machine keep running, and, you don't let people know what your limit is with your family. Then they're just, going to keep using you, and you're going to get burnt out, which we were close to getting burnt out. And I'm glad that we, made the transition here, where life has been a lot better and a lot easier to manage. Definitely. With the family.
Not to ask maybe it's a very pointed question, but how did you draw boundaries? Because I think we talk about drawing boundaries a lot at work, and it's sometimes harder to put those things in practice. And I don't have children myself, but I know that in talking to a lot of my close girlfriends that are still serving, they feel a stigma associated with being the mom that's asking to, change their schedule or have to, fulfill their obligations as a mother and a parent. So do you have any advice to do that, and how to separate yourself from any guilt or stigma that you might feel is associated with doing that?
Yeah, well, the scheduling part is key. And I know, and that's really where we were able to get that time back, was scheduling. So at least the only examples I can give are from an aviation standpoint. So more of a, non-aviation career might be different, but for example, at Holloman, flying would start, at 7 a.m. and sometimes go all the way until, 8 p.m. at night, with 3 different squadrons flying and having to share the airspace. And when my husband and I were flying, we'd offset our schedule enough that one person would be, available to either do kid pickup or drop off, vice versa. And so what we would do is we would just, be like, hey, I'm still going to work my, 8 to 12 hour day, whatever it may be for that, mission. Because sometimes we're working even more than that, 12, 14-hour days. But we would just offset that. Like, hey, I'm going to show up to work a little bit earlier to make sure I'm getting my, required time in, but I got to leave by 4. That's kind of the example that we would set. It's a lot easier in the Guard. The Guard is great. There's set hours, exactly when you're going to be leaving work, when you're going to be showing up for work. It's a lot easier to manage that way, but active duty, it gets challenging, because especially for, if there's, security forces, I know their schedules change. Maintenance, those members, their schedules are, similar to a pilot, where maybe you're showing up in the middle of the night and having to, fix a jet when, as a new mom, that would be really tough, especially if you're, breastfeeding, or, your child's still young. So I think it's important to have leadership that understands the, some of the limitations that not limitations, but some of the unique situations that moms have when you have children, especially when they're young, when they kind of depend on you as especially a food source. That if you don't have a good leader that can kind of work with you and make sure you're still fulfilling your duty, getting your time in that you need for work, but making it good for your family. That's the type of leaders that are keeping people in the military and not getting people, thinking, I'm leaving because my time isn't appreciated. My family's not, appreciated as well.
And what I've noticed is that the leaders that do respect those roles and the unique situations, like you said, they get so much more out of that person because they know that their leader is validating the commitments in their life and trusting them to prioritize their time in the way that they need to, and then they're going to work even harder. So
definitely, yeah, when you feel valued, then of course you're going to get a little bit more work ethic out of you.
So I know you talked about, especially with demanding flight schedules with your husband. I'm sure sometimes it feels like you're two ships passing in the night, just kind of passing the baton of parenting if you're both really busy. Do you have things that, work for the both of you to like stay connected during the week and just like stay on the same, track and, maintain that connectedness with one another, just for those other dual military couples out there that probably feel like they're putting out a bajillion fires every single week?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think having a shared interest or hobby is important. You don't have to love everything that your husband does, but it just turns out that my husband and I have a lot of the same interests besides video gaming. Hence the technical difficulties earlier with with the setup that I was having. But the way that we connect is, when we have our free time, we try to do one of those hobbies, whether it be, taking a long weekend with the kids, or we used to have a rock climbing wall in our garage. So when the kids would go to bed, we would just, hang out in the garage and boulder. And I think having that time to kind of decompress with each other is important. Having, a similar interest, it's like, it doesn't have to be a hobby, but a similar interest where you can sit down, kids are sleeping, and really try to reconnect as a couple is definitely important. Like you said,
I now want a rock climbing wall in my garage. That sounds pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it was our COVID project. When COVID hit, we built it and then we sold it, so we don't currently have that, unfortunately. Awesome. But future goals.
Do you think that your kids are going to become pilots one day, since it's clearly in their blood?
Oof. My son is all airplanes, spaceships, so I think he's got the bug for sure. He's 4.5, and every day he's building new Lego airplanes that actually blow my mind. So he might be an engineer, which would be pretty cool too. So my daughter, she's a wild card. She's definitely the wild child. If you earlier, she was running in here, screaming, and also she had to poop. But so. Who knows what's going to happen?
I love it. Well, thinking about parenting and legacy, I'm going to shift a little bit to legacy and leadership. What does leadership mean to you? And I know that's a really big question to ask, but when you think about effective leadership, what's top of mind?
I think presence, humility, and just trust are kind of the three big keys to a leader. And I kind of take that from having, a lot of commanders and a lot of leaders that I look up to, a lot of maybe not so great leaders, that I've interacted with. And those are kind of the three things that I came up with that really stick out in my mind. The leaders that were present, that were not just like writing emails, they were showing up, saying hi, interacting with everybody, like getting face-to-face time and really understanding what's going on in people's lives. That's important. Kind of what we were talking about earlier, feeling valued is, if you have a leader that, you communicate via email all the time, how are they going to know really, unless you look them in the eye, how they're doing as a leader to their subordinate. Trust is also huge. If you don't trust, you're the person that's, kind of making, giving the orders and kind of navigating the squadron or the unit, the wing, whatever it may be, then you're not going to have people that are going to want to stick with you. And I think humility is the last one, and maybe one of the more important ones. You got to have a little bit of humility. You got to know when you're wrong, and you got to be able to admit to when you're wrong and figure out how to, make it better. Because if you're one of those leaders that, doesn't take any advice, doesn't want any feedback, your answers, your ways the right way, and that's it, then I don't think you're going to have any sort of following and anybody want to stick around and be within your organization. So those are kind of the big things, key takeaways. And I had a experience when I was at Holloman. I was the director of operations for a Fighter Squadron for a while, and those are kind of the three things that I tried to do. And I think the presence was also very difficult. And looking back, I wish I could have been a more present leader while I was in that unit, because a lot of times in that time of my life, it was, kind of hectic with the family, husband working full time, demanding job as well, 2 young kids. And I couldn't be, I could have, but it would have, sacrificed my family life. I couldn't be the one that was hanging out after hours with the students, interacting with them and, giving them the more, social training of, being an officer and a pilot. And so I look back at that in ways that I would like to, be better in the future. And I think that was, those are the kind of the more important aspects of being a leader to me.
Absolutely. I think presence is huge, especially I think these days life is more demanding than ever. And I think that we're expected to be so much at once these days, and the world just moves so fast that I don't think you ever quite feel like you're giving enough of yourself to everything that you're supposed to, unfortunately. I'd be curious if you've ever struggled with that feeling of, and I know you touched on it a little bit, about being in a leadership position and not feeling like you could do every single thing that you wanted to do or hope to do from a leadership perspective. And so what advice would you give to someone listening that is struggling with that? And I can say, I struggle with it every single day of not feeling like you can give 100% to everything all at once, and accepting that and being okay with that. Do you have any advice on how to navigate that, being that you're navigating or you're dealing with so many things day in and day out from a commitment standpoint?
Yeah, I think if you're struggling with that, you need to realize that I don't think there's any single person on this planet that can handle everything that's, thrown at them efficiently and give, and tackle it, especially in a military career field. It's tough. And if you have a family, it's even more challenging, because you got people pulling you in all directions for your attention and your time. And, it's all very valuable, and time management is key. And I think taking what I would do when I was in that role is I would, open up my email and see my hundreds of emails that I needed to look at and respond to, and prioritizing, things that have to get done now, things that have to get done by the end of the day, and things that can wait till the next day. And kind of like I said earlier, setting those boundaries. If you just sit at work for, 14 hours a day, every day, you're going to burn yourself out. So setting those boundaries of, all right, 5 o'clock, I got to get home, got to be home with the kids, got to get them from daycare, and kind of managing your time as appropriately as you can, because it's always challenging. You always have goals that you want to set, but just realizing, hey, if you don't meet those goals at that day, that's fine. Just have a plan to do better the next day, but don't let it, bother you too much. Again, like I said, you can't fix what happened previously. All you can do is make it better in the future, and don't let it snowball effect into, a giant ball of stress that's just ruining your life, essentially.
I love that. Something that I think about a lot, and it kind of connects to the name of this podcast, The Women in the Arena. So putting yourself out there, being adventurous in your life and daring greatly, not listening to what critics say. Have you ever struggled with imposter syndrome, or, being in a role that you didn't feel like you were prepared for, or you didn't think that, you were qualified for? I would imagine that being in high pressure situations as a pilot, you have to feel those feelings sometimes of, how did I get here? Or, am I the right person for the job? And how did you navigate that? Because you have to navigate it in order to show up and do your job every day.
Yeah. I definitely, some days I'm like, man, how did I get here? I'm doing my dream job. Sometimes it's surreal in a good way. And it's a good feeling. I feel like I have come so far that it's kind of amazing from like my dream of being an astronaut as a girl. I'm not an astronaut, obviously, but my goal to be a fighter pilot, and I'm doing it. And some days I wake up, I'm like, man, I can't believe I actually did that. And then in other ways, when you're in a role or you're in a situation where as you're the instructor, you're the one that is supposed to be instructing the students. And if it's a challenging situation, kind of sitting back and kind of taking it all in. And realize I've had a few situations where I'm like, man, I'm the one. They're all looking up to me. I'm the person that needs to make the decision, and kind of getting your mind out of that mentality of that imposter syndrome and focusing on the mission at hand. I think is kind of what gets me through that. At least when I wake up and like I shouldn't be here. I can't believe I'm doing this amazing job. Like I'm just this little Minnesotan girl. I don't know. You're like, no, I actually worked my butt off to be here. And it wasn't easy because I feel like I'm mediocre at everything I do. I just, try really hard. And if I struggle at something, I know that's what I need to focus on for that day. Take it, a little step at a time, figure out where your weaknesses are, and move on from there. One of my weaknesses is grammar also. So, and spelling apparently.
Well, I know you're not mediocre at everything you do because of how far you've gotten in life, but I do respect the idea of you've worked so hard to get somewhere, and it almost makes it more gratifying that you had to work as hard as you did, and it wasn't a gimme. It wasn't something that just fell into your lap. What advice would you give to any of our listeners that have dreams of being in the sky, whether it be as an astronaut or a pilot or whatever it may be? Because I think that this is going to reach some young listeners that were in your shoes one day and had these dreams. What advice would you give them?
If you have the dream to fly, go do it. And I know I say that, but financially speaking, it's expensive as a civilian to get into it. And what I did, I wanted to fly, and I knew what my goal was. Just getting in the air was my number one focus. So I took all my high school savings and I would take flying lessons. And if you haven't flown, if you have the dream of flying and that first flight that you take and you're up in the air, I think that'll be the bug. You'll catch the bug, and you'll want to pursue the career. And I think it's a great career because there's a ton of different avenues you can take, whether it be if you're going to do the path that I did, where you are in the military, and then maybe eventually you can branch out to more corporate or commercial flying. Great opportunities there. If you start with the civilian route, and I know a lot of people that started the civilian route and then they went military. So there's no right or wrong answer. If you have a dream of being an aviator, a pilot, then just start flying. If you can start saving some money, hell, even like a little Microsoft flight simulator, just start doing that, and start warming up your hands for flight. And that's probably the best advice that I can give is just if you have any inkling, just give it a go. Because I know a lot of people that are currently some of the best fighter pilots that I know that didn't even really want to fly. They didn't, they were going through college and they're like, maybe I'll be an engineer, maybe I'll be an intelligence officer. And they had a little tiny inkling that they wanted to fly, and they caught the bug, and now they're some of the best pilots that I know.
I love that. Well, what's next for you? We've talked about what you've done so far. What's coming up for you aside from your deployment?
Yeah, the deployment is we call it near rocks, far rocks when we are talking about goals, typically as a fighter pilot. So near rocks are the things that are right ahead of us to worry about, and the deployment is right around the corner, and I'll be getting back from that. And after I get back in the fall, I'll be just looking to spend time with the family and continuing to fly here. Also pursuing a career in commercial aviation. So I'm going to be working on my airline applications while I'm deployed. So that's kind of a I wouldn't call it far rocks, medium rocks type of goal, hopefully getting hired by one of the majors in the future. And what I would like to do is continue to serve my country in the Guard, continuing to fly a few days a week, and then also, branching out and trying the civilian world of aviation. which I think would be pretty
now
cool.
I have a goal of flying with you on my next American Airlines flight. Well, not next. It'll take a little bit, but in the coming years, that would be
Yeah, it'll be a
pretty dang cool.
while.
And I have no doubt that you'll do that.
Yeah.
What legacy do you want to leave behind when you finally exit the military?
Oh boy. I just would like to, know that I did the best I could do in my job, that I was, a good mom as far as, a personal life goes. I think it goes a long way when you have the ability to get along with people too. I don't know. I just would like to be known as, friendly person. Minnesota nice is probably where I got that from. I don't know. There's a lot of fighter pilots out there that are, a little bit brash and, we sometimes call it cocky, confident would be the correct term, but, humble I think is important. I think humility and, being humble is a really important aspect in people's lives. Cause I hope my children grow up, with that type of humility and just, learning that you can make mistakes and, pick yourself back up and learn from them and keep moving forward.
I have no doubt that you will leave that legacy behind. And you are adding to the stereotype of Minnesota nice that exists. I have a handful of friends that are from there, and it's like that stereotype keeps going, and I love it. So
Yeah.
It's a great state. Awesome. Well, one of my final closing questions for you is, do you have a woman in the arena in your life, a woman that you looked up to from afar, or somebody maybe in your family that has inspired you to chase your dreams, to get up in the air, like you said, to be a mom, whatever it may be, but someone that inspired you to dare greatly and look fearlessly into your future and conquer your goals?
Oh, I got to give credit to my mom because she's just a great woman. She was such a present mom when I was a child, and that's kind of what made me want to be a more present mom when I had kids. And I have all these great memories of being with my mom and hanging out with her as a child, and I want my kids to have that. But from a from a career standpoint, she always encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do, as far as, not whatever I wanted to do, but, from a, like a career standpoint, a goal standpoint, if there was, an idea that I had, she'd be like, you can do it. You can do whatever you put your mind to. And she really encouraged me from a very young age to go for it. And I think she deserves a lot of credit to, why I am here right now and doing what I've always wanted to do. So, Mom, thank you if you're listening.
Awesome. Yes, mom's rule. My mom is mine as well. So I love that. Well, Danny, thank you so much. You, like I said, are my Captain Marvel, and I think you're awesome. And we so appreciate you contributing to this season of the Women in the Arena and dialing in from afar, taking a breather from your busy life, juggling so many things. And we know that your inspiring story and who you are as a person is going to reach so many people and inspire so many people. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It was an honor to get to be on your podcast. So thank you.
And we hope that you can wear your Women in the Arena bracelet. We hope you can take it with you on your deployment and use it as a source of encouragement, and know that you've got an arena of women that are cheering you on from afar always.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny.
The Women in the Arena podcast is powered by Iron Butterfly Media, a production company committed to honoring the lives of women who have had an unseen and outsized impact on our world. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have a woman who you would like to nominate as a guest, please shoot us a message on our social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe and follow on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. See you next time.